It had been a few days since the battle in the glade. They had barely stopped since, and had lit no fires. They had reached the feet of the Theldic hills, and had followed them eastward. They had not climbed the heights, for on them was the touch of the dark land. They had crossed the Daerol during the night, the only time they had used the road, then had pressed on. They had continued until late afternoon, when they had come across a small stream flowing from the hills. Though it came out of the cursed land, no fellness was upon it, and it purled peacefully. They set up camp some distance away from the stream, somewhat hidden within a thicket of rowan. As evening set in, they lit a campfire. So, how does one come to learn magic? Anaea said. Nelren cast a suspicious glance at her, but remained silent. Thaelen raised an eyebrow. Why would you like to know? If my mother could learn, then maybe I can. There's no guarantee that you will be, even if your mother was, Taela said, poking at the fire with a stick. Anaea looked at her questioningly. Thaelen cleared his throat. If both parents are capable, then the likelihood is very high, but not certain. It all depends on your reserve and your power. Reserve? Yes, every person has a reserve of magic. When a spell is cast, the magic is taken from the reserve, and if the reserve runs out, you cannot cast magic until it is refilled. And how is it refilled? Everywhere around us there is the ley, the source of magic. Some scholars believe it flows into Aethal from the poles. It replenishes the reserve at a constant rate that barely changes across the world. Anaea nodded. And power? It dictates how powerful you are, Taela said. And how would one come to know how great one's reserve is? And how powerful one is? A skilled mage can sense such things, Thaelen said. And are you a skilled mage? Nelren said. Taela stopped poking the fire for a moment. Anaea looked at her brother with disapproval. Even non-mages can sense some magic around them, though they might not understand what they are feeling. Can you feel anything in me? Thaelen reached out with an open palm. Your hand. She took it, and as she did, Thaelen closed his eyes. For a minute he sat holding her hand, saying no word. The fire cracked and popped, and a slight breeze played with the branches of the trees. There's magic there, he said at last. Enough to be taught from what I can gauge at least. He removed his hand. Could you teach me? I would advise you not play with the fire that killed our mother, Nelren said. It wasn't magic that killed her, Anaea snapped. It was magic that led to her death. She did not hurt anyone. She healed a man. Thaelen cleared his throat. Neither me or Taela are teachers. We were students ourselves up until just before midsummer. Gods protect us. Nelren sighed. The guild has sent out students. But we can try, Thaelen said. The first step takes some time, though. It's not easy to recognize your own magic. What must I do? Now Taela spoke. Recognizing your magic on your own is not impossible, but very hard. But with a guide, a teacher, it becomes much easier. Indeed, Thaelen said. We will need to do some mind-to-mind communication. It's too late for lessons on anything right now, Nelren said coldly, cutting Thaelen off. We need to get up early tomorrow. Taela took the first watch. The sky darkened above her, and her thoughts wandered home, to the mansion in Arad, but also to the castle in Leaid. Though she had always wanted adventure, she now missed her family. Her father, Ruhil, her mother, Riane, her sister, Lirae, and even her annoying brother, Kiran. She gazed at the stars. They glittered far above, shining lanterns upon the firmament. Each glimmered, twinkling, and she spotted Telanos on his journey above, shining like the stars. He was close to Anole, his wife. The two gods seemed so distant. She could almost imagine that they were riding far above, singing like they had in the time before the divine betrayal. It was said that they had met upon Eathal long before any mortal had awoken. They had met in a glade, basked in evening light, and they had sung and danced beneath the stars. Their love was eternal, a flame that never died. Her eyes fell upon Thaelen, sleeping in his sleeping bag. A smile spread upon her face. She remembered their first kiss. It had been a summer eve some years ago, just after summer's break had begun. She remembered the warm breeze and the smell of roses. She still remembered it so clearly, so vividly. She wondered if Telanos and Anole remembered their first time as clearly as she did. Her gaze lingered on Thaelen. She trailed his cheek with her gaze, going up towards his pointed ear. It was somewhat obscured by his jet black hair. She cared for him deeply, and even before they had fallen in love, he had been one of her closest friends. Friends. Her thoughts went to Pashara. She had become part of their little friend group a tad later. Pashara had always been alone, and not because she wanted to. She had stood out and had been easy to bully. Taela and Thaelen had stood up for her, and ever since they had been a trio. In their teens, they had caused such trouble, and Taela smiled as she remembered. There was that time they snuck into the restricted basement, and that time when they had made a love potion which caused a fellow classmate to fall in love with a toad. She wondered how Pash was holding up. Of course, she could not have known that Pashala was currently in Daerol, or that she had just survived an assassination attempt. In fact, it was at that very moment, when Taela was thinking about her, that Pashala defeated the assassin. In time, Taela awoke Anaea, who was to take the second watch. Anything happened? Nothing. Anaea nodded. Taela went to sleep. The following morning they rose early and were off quickly. They marched as Eliva climbed into the sky. Morning became midday, and they stopped for a break. Taela took flight and scouted about. She came back less than 10 minutes later. "They're right on our tail," she said after she had shifted back into human form. "How far behind?" Thaelen asked. 5 minutes, perhaps, but that's not... "We need to keep going," Nelren said. "Will you listen to me? There's a party in front of us as well." "How far away are they?" Anaea asked. Similar distance." "Any to the south?" Nelren asked. "Not that I know," she replied. "But I fear we cannot flank them unseen." They fell silent. None wanted to speak what they each thought. North was the only road they could take, straight through the dark land. It had been the heartland of Thaelen, but had fallen near 1,000 years before, when necromancers had raised a tide of undead. The battles had been long and hard fought, and Greater Thaelen had collapsed, leaving the kingdom only a shell of its former self. For some time Elrin had held the crown of Thaelen, but the old kingdom had eventually been dissolved. Some foul spell was upon that land, and nothing hale grew there. It was a place where the dead did not remain still, and darkness crept up from hidden hollows and tunnels. Death behind me, death in front of me. Where then shall I go but into the nether? Nelren said, quoting a play. I should never have helped a mage. We could just enter it briefly, Taela proposed, and then head back out once we have shaken our pursuers. But whatever we decide, we do not have time to remain here. Nelren nodded, his face set in an expression of annoyance. We don't have much choice. Let's go. They turned north, towards the cursed land. As they went, Thaelen noticed that the thickets grew thicker, and sickly brambles spread beneath the trees. They came across an old road. It was largely overgrown, and only a few paved stones were visible in the grass. It was, in fact, one of Thaelden's old roads, and led north. They followed it now in haste, for they could hear their pursuers behind them. Suddenly, the trees before them changed. Behind them the trees seemed normal, even if they were smothered by brambles and thorns. But the trees before them were different. They felt wrong, fell. They rose like foreboding pillars, crowned in a veil of darkness. Now Thaelen had seen dark and ominous trees before. He had seen the famed nightshade forest that hugged the white mountains down in Anmara. But these trees were different. The nightshade trees were of Nuvia's make, dark yet fair. These ominous creatures were touched by something wholly different. It emanated from them and crept into their hearts. Thaelen gazed into the thicket before him. His chest tightened. A gloom crept beneath the leaves, and it seemed that not even Heliva's rays could pierce it. Like a fog, it lingered between the trunks. It felt wrong. Everything about it felt wrong. "Is there no alternative?" he asked. "Not unless you want to be captured by the guards," Nelren said. Right on cue there came the bark of dogs behind them, followed by the shouts of people. "I see 'em! Just up the road!" Without another word, Nelren headed in beneath those dark leaves. The others followed a few breaths later. "You children and followers of the Makers, guide our steps now. Guard us, protect us, deliver us from evil," Anaea prayed silently. They rushed down the old road, half sprinting. A bend took the road eastwards. Before turning the bend, Taela stopped and gazed back. Their pursuers had stopped before the ominous trees, and the dogs were whimpering. A few crossbow bolts were fired towards her direction, prompting her to continue. After a few minutes of jogging, they halted. They panted. The air beneath the boughs was stifling. There were no sounds, not of birds or critters, not even the whisper of the wind. The road was largely untouched by time. Only the edges were overgrown with thorns and ivy. The grass that grew between the flat pavestones seemed too hale for the twisted forest about them, and the flowers that grew seemed too fair. Perhaps Heliva's light, which fell upon the road, kept the gloom at bay, or perhaps the haleness and fairness was a ruse. Anaea gazed into the depths on either side. There in the gloom she spotted ruins, overgrown, yet largely intact. The town of Lethor, its fate well known in Daeria. It had stood against the undead tide for 7 days before falling. A 9-year-old girl, the sole survivor. Now all that remained were the broken husks of stone buildings left to crumble. And yet they were in better condition than ruins of later buildings to be found in Daerol. It was as if time itself slowed within this accursed land, as if some foul presence shone the ruin of Thaelen off, in mockery of all that it had stood for. She shuddered. "Are you all right?" Nelren asked her. "Can one be all right here, brother?" He shook his head. They continued down the road, following its curvy path. At times the road disappeared into thickets and growths of thorns, but they managed, with some difficulty, to follow it well enough. They took a short break during the afternoon, resting as well as they could within the oppressive atmosphere of the dark land around them. Taela flew about for a few minutes. She found no sign of their pursuers. They did not linger for too long, and were off again shortly after.